Hey folks, tonight we're diving into the wild world of Egyptian royal concubines, ladies who shared the king's bed, waiting years just for a glance, learning how to flirt and dodge poison all at once. So, before you get comfy, take a sec to like and subscribe, but only if you actually dig what I'm doing here. And drop a comment telling me what channel you're watching and what time it is where you are. It's fun to see who's tuning in from all over, maybe curled up under a blanket with a cup of tea. Now, dim those lights. Maybe turn on a fan for some soothing white noise. Let's embark on tonight's journey together. The sun rises gently over the Nile. Birds chirping. The palace creaks. And just as your dream hits a dramatic peak, maybe a shirtless scribe surrounded by figs, you're jolted awake by a servant's whisper, cheerfully warning you that you look a bit puffy this morning. Welcome to the life of an Egyptian royal concubine. Sleeping in, not on the menu. Pharaoh might not visit today. Actually, he might never visit. But who cares? Your state property, a living decoration, and your biological clock now ticks for looking good before breakfast. You're hauled out of your coarse but stylish linen sheets and immediately handed a bronze mirror. This isn't a kind gesture. It's a diagnostic tool. How's your skin? Missing any eyebrow hairs? Have your lips lost that lotus petal shine yet? These are not rhetorical questions. Your entire future might hinge on whether your face shines more than the girl snoring next to you. Next comes stretching, not for fitness, but to fix your posture. Slouching means a bad angle, and a bad angle means you're stuck at the back of the lineup forever. You spend 10 minutes pacing, balancing a bowl of fragrant water on your head while pretending this is the highlight of your day. Breakfast arrives, a plate of dates, figs, and maybe a halved pomegranate to help with portion control. You eat slowly because nothing kills allure faster than chewing. On the other side of the room, other concubines do the same, each trying to look casual while silently competing in a blinkless, eye contact-free stamina contest. The servant returns, suggesting you cool your under eyes because apparently you look like someone just told you the pharaoh prefers harp players. You comply. The cloth smells like lavender and ambition, and so begins the new day, not with grandeur or glory, but with a series of tiny, exhausting rituals designed to help you become naturally divine. You haven't said a word yet. You haven't left the room, but you've already fought your first battle, waking up and pretending you haven't aged a bit in the last 12 hours. Spoiler alert, you'll do it all again tomorrow. Bath time for a concubine isn't about hygiene. It's a transformation. You're not just a woman with sleepy eyes. You're a royal vessel. Obviously, that jar needs soaking, scrubbing, hair removal, and sauce pouring like a sacred goose before it's deemed presentable. You're led to a bath, smelling like a perfume shop, crashed into a citrus orchard. The water's infused with lotus petals, jasmine oil, and something they claim is the scent of sacred intent. It's more of a fragrant baptism than a bath. You're not just washing, you're stepping into your first performance of the day. Two servants approach with sponges that are equally gentle and judgmental. You're scrubbed with natron powder, a salty mineral exfoliant that erases shame and any last memories of village life. Every inch of you polished like a sacrificial offering. Then comes hair removal. Every hair beneath your eyebrows must vanish. Wax, pluck, shave, pick your torture method. Body hair is ugly, unhygienic, and worst of all, way too common, designed to help you become divine naturally. You haven't said a word yet. You haven't left the room. But you've already fought your first battle, Woke up feeling like you didn't age a bit in the last 12 hours. Spoiler alert, you'll have to do it all again tomorrow. Now it's bath time for a side wife, and no, it's not about hygiene. It's transformation. You're not just a woman with sleepy scales in your eyes. You're a royal vessel with potential. And obviously, that jar needs soaking, scrubbing, hair removal, and sauce pouring like some sacred goose before it's considered presentable. You'll be led to a bathroom smelling like a perfume shop, crashed into a citrus orchard, water infused with lotus petals, jasmine oil, and something claimed to be the scent of divine intent. It's more like a fragrant baptism than a bath. You're not just washing off, you're stepping into your morning debut. Two attendants approach with sponges that are both gentle and suspiciously judgy. You'll be rubbed down with natron powder, a salty mineral, exfoliant that scrubs off dead skin, shame, and any lingering memories of your rural life. Every inch of your body polished like a sacrificial offering. Then comes hair removal. Every stray hair under your brows must vanish. Waxing, plucking, shaving, pick your torture method. Body hair was seen as ugly, unhygienic, and worst of all, way too common. You grit your teeth as the wax rips off and remind yourself queens don't complain. They politely hiss. Then, a thick, fragrant almond oil is poured over you by someone who only knows how to flatter. You get massaged until your skin shines and you slide slightly on the floor, trying to stand up. You've become a living candle. Now, for the perfume. It's not sprayed on. It's layered. First a base musk, then citrus notes in the middle, and floral scents on top. You smell like a god or a fruit basket at a wedding. This fragrance sticks around all day. That's the point. If you walk past the pharaoh and he sneezes, don't call it allergies. No, sir, that's a tactical win. Eventually, you get handed a clean linen robe, naturally sheer, and politely reminded to sit up straight for the next hour so the essential oils can soak in nice and easy. Translation: don't mess up the shine. Now you're clean, not because you were dirty, but because the expectations demand it. You've completed your ritual. After your ceremonial bath, it's time for the next morning phase, washing your face. Forget inner beauty. You need to earn the divine favor with perfectly sculpted cheekbones and eyeliner sharp enough to be considered a military asset. You're sitting in front of a polished bronze mirror, the ancient Egyptian version of the influencer's ring light. A cosmetic seller approaches, carrying what looks like a miniature painter's toolkit: galena powder, red ochre, crushed carmine beetles. You're about to become a living fresco. First up, eyeliner. Black charcoal is treated with the same reverence a priest shows to sacred scrolls. Lines must be precise, not too heavy unless you want to look like you're auditioning to be an editor. Not too light, or people might mistake you for a writing intern. It's a fine balance between mystery and menace. You're told to hold still. Good advice, unless you're currently having a reed stick poked into your eyeball. Just one tear and the whole thing smudges. Then you look tired. And tired women don't get summoned by pharaohs. They get reassigned to folding linen. Next, lipstick. Earthy red, mixed with animal fat, because nothing says romance like beetle powder chapstick. Your lips must look full but modest, which is definitely a real instruction. Try not to overthink that. Then blush, a little dusting on the cheeks to fake youthful vigor. Even though you haven't had a good night's sleep since the last flood. Fatigue from high status must be hidden. You're allowed to look pensive, not exhausted. A slave girl steps up with an ivory eyebrow comb. Eyebrows are shaped to reflect dignity, fertility, and maybe political loyalty. No one's really sure anymore. You nod, like you get the eyebrow hierarchy. Finally, perfume again. This time behind the ears and on wrists. Because that's where the pharaoh might casually touch someday, if he's bored enough to drop by. Now you're beautiful, glossy, and possibly smoking hot. You glance in the mirror. You look like someone in a tomb fresco, offering lotus flowers to a god. Now, all you need is a god who's hiring. After you've bathed, groomed, oiled up, shaved, painted your nails, sprayed perfume, and been complimented for looking radiant, but not as radiant as yesterday. It's breakfast time. The haram dining hall isn't exactly bustling. It's more like a fashion runway where people sit down. Dozens of women gather, wearing thin linen outfits that practically whisper. Approachable, but ambitious. They glide to their low tables with the precision of a stalking crocodile. Silent, slow, and sizing each other up. Your meal is minimalist, but chic. A small plate of honey-soaked dates, 2 figs, and a little yogurt. Not nearly enough to satisfy hunger, but just enough to keep those cheekbones intact. You're supposed to eat gracefully, with 3 fingers, because forks are still a millennium away, and greed is apparently reserved for widows and scribes. And here's where passive-aggressive warfare begins. Oh, your call today is bold. Someone giggles from across the table, smiling wide except for the eyes. You politely thank her while noticing her eyeliner is crooked and her earlobes uneven. A young concubine accidentally sits next to you, then loudly boasts that she stayed up all night practicing harp just in case the pharaoh is in the mood for music. Translation: she thinks tonight might be her night. You smile, chew slowly, and let a fig seed rest on your lip like a challenge. Conversations swirl around you. Rumors start flying about who cried in the bathroom, who borrowed whose perfume without asking, who was spotted leaving the astrology room with a hopeful look. Everyone pretended not to care. Spoiler, no one really did. Just make sure you don't eat too fast. Women who finish quickly are greedy, and those who don't eat at all are trying way too hard. You want to hit that sweet spot in the middle. Casual elegance mixed with strategic chewing. The servant pours palm wine into your cup, but only a little. Too much, and someone might start telling the wrong story to the wrong person. Breakfast ends with brushing teeth using a chew stick and a pinch of sodium. You smile at the bronze mirror, thinking, another meal down. Another war, disguised as brunch. After breakfast, you think it's time to relax. Maybe nap. Maybe do something useful. But nope. You're entering the most exhausting part of your day. Showing up with an aesthetically pleasing kind of tired. This isn't rest. This is performance art. You're assigned to the relaxation room. Which sounds fun, until you realize it's a space designed for 2 things: looking fabulous and being seen looking fabulous. You and 24 other concubines lie on embroidered cushions arranged to maximize sight lines and minimize shadows. No frowning allowed. Your posture has to scream nobility, fertility, and just the right hint of delicate boredom. You can pick any activity, as long as it's purely decorative. Reading hieroglyphs out loud, too brainy. playing the harp ideal, sniffing flowers while dreamy staring at palm leaves highly encouraged, anything that feels sacred but is totally available. If you're really brave, you can fake accidental elegance like letting your sandal slip off while stretching, or sighing deeply as if pondering the mysteries of love, politics, or your non-existent retirement plan. These are carefully rehearsed mini-plays designed to catch attention without screaming. Look at me. Some newbies try too hard, striking poses that basically shout, "Pharaoh, pick me," with all the subtlety of temple bells. These efforts get polite applause and immediate gossip. But you're the pro. You know the trick isn't to look like you're trying. The trick is to look like you're gliding gracefully while calculating exactly how much effort to expend. Occasionally, a scribe or messenger passes by. You pretend not to notice. You shift slightly to a better lit spot. You're a statue pretending to breathe, a lotus flower in linen. And if by chance Pharaoh hears that the mysterious girl third from the left caught his eye today, congratulations. Your decoration efforts have paid off. You've officially wasted 2 hours doing absolutely nothing beautiful. And in this palace, that's not laziness, that's strategy. After surviving 1 or 2 hours of graceful existence with proper posture, dreamy eyes, and mystery, it's time for your daily lesson. Don't get excited. This isn't education that gets you a degree or a job offer. This is concubine training, where the curriculum has to be interesting enough to hold Pharaoh's attention for 6 minutes without suggesting that women might be smart. You enter a sunlit room where instructors wait, dressed in scholarly linen robes and holding wax tablets. Today's lesson: how to tune a harp, recite poetry, and tilt your head thoughtfully when discussing dreams. Music is the most respected skill. A concubine who can play harp perfectly might just rearrange the court's hierarchy. You're taught traditional love songs, all featuring lines like, "My heart blooms like bulrushes, and my eyes are more intoxicating than date wine." You're encouraged to be sincere, or at least fake it with the right shoulder movement. Poetry is listened to, not written. No way. That's for old men with bad backs. You read it softly and keep your emotions in check. You practice lines like "the moon weeps for my longing" without giggling, even though everyone knows the moon, all full of lines like, "My heart blooms like a reed, and your eyes intoxicate more than date wine." You're encouraged to be honest, or at least fake it by moving your shoulders just right. Poetry comes after, not writing it. Oh no, for old men with bad backs, you read it gently and keep your emotions in check. You practice saying things like, "The moon weeps for my longing" without giggling, even though everyone knows the moon is way too busy controlling tides to care about your relationship status. Sometimes, a priest will teach you some basic hieroglyphs. Not too many, just enough to write "Pharaoh shines like Ra," or "I dream of lotus blossoms." Anything more complicated risks sounding opinionated. You also get mythology lessons. Specifically, how to tell Pharaoh apart from all kinds of gods without mixing them up. Anubis is power. This is wisdom. Ra is strength. Never confuse them unless you want to be remembered as the girl who called Pharaoh a wild dog. At the end of the lesson, you get tested, of course, unofficial. Just awkward questions like, if the king asks who your favorite god is, what do you say? The right answer: whoever he reminds me of. This education might not get you ready for the outside world, but if the pharaoh needs a song, a poem, or a compliment at just the right moment, you'll be on point. Maybe by now. You've read enough poetry to qualify as a sentimental statue time to practice some fine-tuning exercises, a daily habit to help you glide like smoke, smile like a goddess, and never trip in front of royalty. First up, walking practice. Yep, walking. Thought you mastered this at age 2. Nope, not here. In Haram, walking is not just walking, it's a performance. You have to glide over marble like your feet barely touch the ground. The problem? Your sandals are slippery, the floor is shiny, and there's always some girl hoping you faceplant. To help, the instructor places a clay pot full of water on your head. Go walk down the hallway without spilling a drop, or else keep your upper body tense and annoyed at all times. Every step is a negotiation between seriousness and pride. Survive that humiliation. Then it's time for dance practice. You and the others line up, taught to sway, like fish swimming in a river. But sexier. Hands up. Hips loose, but not too loose. You still have to look respectable. You copy the temple dancers, silently praying no one notices your right foot's rebellious attitude. Slip up, and you get constructive feedback, mainly just regular criticism. Someone says you're stiff. Another complains your rhythm's iffy. You nod politely while plotting to stab your own shadow with your hairpin. Nod politely while scheming to stab your own shadow with a hairpin. Then comes the lesson on gestures. Concubines don't just point, they open up. They don't wave, they fan. Everything has to look effortless, even when your arm's numb and your perfume's evaporating. Next, you get reminded how to kneel sincerely, but not desperately. The difference is all in the eyebrow angle. Finally, you finish with voice training, speaking softly, seductively, and never too fast. You practice saying, "Oh Lord," in 20 different ways, each with a slightly different meaning. From "I humbly bow before your greatness" to "Please don't breathe on me." You sweat, ache, and achieve zero measurable progress. But now, you walk prettier. And that's what really counts in this palace. After mastering balance exercises, fake sighs, and daily bows, you head back to the common room, the ancient Egyptian version of a break room. If that room's full of silk-clad women silently battling eye contact and seat arrangements. Here, gossip is not just a pastime, it's a life skill. In fact, this might be the most useful survival tool in a concubine's kit. Some girls get ahead by dancing, others by smiling, but the truly dangerous ones know everything. And honestly, who doesn't love a little flattering? You sit near a group of women stringing beads. The conversation starts innocent enough, like a servant accidentally dropping a fruit bowl in front of the secretary. But within 5 minutes, it's all about who got new jewelry, who was seen leaving the astrologer's room with smudged eyeliner, and who's been mysteriously silent since last week's sandal fitting. The name is never spoken outright, just implied. The tall one with the heavy perfume. You know, the girl who always looks like she's about to sneeze. Everyone nods. Everyone knows. The older concubines don't speak much. They listen because rumors aren't just juicy. They're valuable. If you know the pharaoh prefers mead over date wine, that's leverage. If you know his mother trusts no priest, that's insurance. You contribute carefully. Insurance. You contribute carefully. Speak too little, and you become irrelevant. Speak too much, And suddenly, you accidentally insult Bastet and get insurance. You contribute carefully. Say too little, and you're meaningless. Say too much, and suddenly you've accidentally offended Bastet and end up demoted to ceremonial napkin folder. Some women with more experience even keep coded wax tablets, not diaries, but tactical observation logs, spreadsheets of betrayal, jealousy, and who coughed during the harp solo. And of course, double gossip. When someone tells you a secret about a person who once told you that secret, that's when things get interesting. That's when you start playing palace chess. You never talk smack about the pharaoh directly. That's suicide. But other concubines, oh, go ahead. Predictably, you're really just doing your civic duty. By the end of the day, you've learned more than a poetry class and locked eyes with 3 future enemies. Success. After a morning of posing, powdering, and palace spying, it's time to prep for the day's highlight event for every concubine, the heart-racing wait to be summoned by the pharaoh. Let's be real, though. He might not show up. Maybe he's busy checking irrigation plans, overseeing construction projects, or listening to musicians with names like Hinu the Flatulent. But none of that matters, because you still have to act like he might stroll in at any second. You're led to the waiting room, a gold-plated chamber filled with cushions, incense, and women, sitting in 3 signature poses, serene but seductive, peaceful but radiant, and desperately pretending not to care. You pick a spot by the window, so natural light hits your cheekbones just right. Not that you practice this or anything. A servant enters. Everyone subtly turns their heads. Is she here to summon someone? Nope. She's just refilling the fruit bowl. Still, a tense moment passes as you wonder if your grape placement is fancy enough. You shift positions every 15 minutes, not for comfort. Comfort is impossible, but to keep your limbs from going numb. Just in case you get called in and have to glide in like moonlight. You practice looking surprised, but grateful, just in case your name actually gets mentioned. Some girls stay humble. Others recite love poems they wrote themselves, which is both tragic and brave. One girl quietly collects her spoils like she's praying for fate. You sip some wine, pretend not to judge her, and mentally rewrite her lyrics to rhyme better. Hours pass. A breeze stirs the linen curtains somewhere down the hall. Footsteps click on stone. Everyone freezes. Then silence. False alarm. Someone just went to the bathroom. You sigh politely. Inside, you're screaming. Finally, a servant appears and calls another's name. Fake enthusiasm ripples through the room. You smile like you're genuinely happy for her. She glides past, smug and barefoot, smelling like victory and rose oil. You're left with your thoughts, carefully curated poses, and a lingering scent of disappointment. No visit today, but maybe tomorrow. So you stay, beautiful, calm, and ready to face a man who probably can't even remember what your voice sounds like. If Pharaoh's harem were a garden, if Ritu wouldn't be the peaceful lotus pond poets always write about. No, it's more like a perfectly trimmed hedge maze with smiling tigers. Every concubine here is sweet, fragrant, and scheming actively. You quickly learn power. Here isn't just about looks. Everyone's beautiful. That's the entrance fee. What really matters: alliances, influence, and the ability to say, "You look radiant," while thinking, "I hope your eyeliner melts off." Some girls form tight little cliques, usually clustering around those confirmed to have audiences the previous evening. These groups are part gossip club, part spy network, and part human chess game. Joining one is like marrying into nobility. You get protection, status, and lifelong suspicion. Then there are the floaters like you, silent observers who smile at everyone but trust no one. You listen more than you talk. You compliment more than confess. And you always pretend not to hear the things you definitely heard. The smile is your go-to tool. There's the polite smile, the supportive smile, the passive-aggressive smile, and the grateful smile for that totally unnecessary comment. You switch between them like a spy network and part human chess game. Joining a family like this is like marrying into nobility. You get protection, status, and lifelong suspicion. Then there are the hoverers like you, silent watchers, smiling at everyone but trusting no one. You listen more than you talk. You flatter more than confess. And you always pretend not to hear the things you definitely heard. Smiling is your go-to tool. There's the polite smile, the supportive smile, the passive-aggressive smile, and the thanks for that totally unnecessary comment smile. You switch between them like a seasoned diplomat. Some senior concubines have mastered the so-called invisible war, where no insults are ever spoken, yet entire careers get destroyed over overly specific compliments. Of course, she got picked. Pharaohs always loved women who looked like mothers. Occasionally, a new girl tries to be sincere. She opens up, shares her past, and asks for advice. That usually ends with her feeling miserable at breakfast the next day. Lesson learned. You discover that maintaining neutral alliances is an art. Compliment one girl too much, you're her servant. Compliment two, you're a traitor. Compliment none, you're distant. Best two. Just sincerely compliment the cat. And through it all, you smile. Because a smile can hide anxiety. A smile can buy time. It convinces everyone, even yourself, that you're still in the game, even if you're just another pawn being moved around. Nothing shakes the harem's mood like the sudden arrival of the great royal wife, a title that means you're all lovely. But I've got my own chariot for my jewels. She doesn't visit often. Honestly, she doesn't have to. Her presence lingers like the scent of incense and suppressed ambition. But when she steps in, the room flips from polite competition to total emotional silence in 3 seconds flat. You don't hear her coming. You feel her like a sandstorm wrapped in silk. Conversation vanishes. The fig fruit freezes midair. Everyone suddenly remembers to cross their legs, adjust their posture, and pretend the nearest plant is fascinating. And then she floats in. Everyone suddenly remembers to cross their legs, adjust their posture, and pretend they're captivated by the nearest potted plant. And then she appears. She's older than most of you, which means she's seen a lot. She walks like she's been past anxious girls in fancy linen for 20 years. Her charcoal dress is darker, her headpiece higher. Her smile is a masterclass in managing royal threats. She slowly and cautiously locks eyes with each person. No words, just a flicker of amusement like, I know which one of you thinks she's clever. I also know which one of you cried in the bath last week. She doesn't need to say a thing. When she does speak, it's usually vague enough to spook you. Like, I hope the younger girls will behave wisely. No names, no accusations, just enough hint to cause a tiny emotional meltdown in 3 corners of the room. You flash the most respectful smile you've got, the smile reserved for women who could toss you into weaving duty without blinking. She nods ever so slightly. Success. Today you don't have to call ahead. That's a win. Some girls try to impress her. They attempt subtle, graceful moves retelling a myth, straightening a flower vase just right, praising the anklet she picked like it's a holy relic. She indulges them. She's seen it all because she used to be one of them. But she plays better and she wins. Then, just as suddenly, she leaves, gliding out like a golden mirage. Nobody breathes for 10 seconds. Then, slowly, conversations resume. Softer, more careful. The queen has entered and reminded everyone what real power looks like. As the sun sets over the palace walls, casting golden light on the Nile, the mood inside the harem shifts. Perfume gets reapplied, hair retied, linen smoothed out. Because when darkness creeps in, opportunity follows, along with a refined kind of emotional torture called maybe tonight. You've spent all day polished, painted, and perfectly polite. Now you wait. But this time, the stakes are higher. This isn't about being seen. It's about being chosen. Maybe the pharaoh will send a servant. Maybe not. The one sure thing is the tense atmosphere and the faint scent of rose oil mixed with ambition. Young concubines pretend not to care. They hum quietly, rehearse harp tunes, or casually mention dreams about cobra queens and marriage. The older, wiser, sharper ones just sit and sip wine. They've played this game so long, they won't give anything away. Watch the king cobra and marriage. Older, wiser, sharper folks just sit and sip wine. They've played this game too long to show their hand now. Naturally, you do what all smart women did at sunset in ancient Egypt. You smile vaguely and try not to look like you're rehearsing your shocked but excited face in your head. The servant enters. Everyone goes silent. She clears her throat. Names are never shouted. They're whispered like hymns. If it's your name, you gracefully stand as if that moment hadn't occupied your thoughts all day. If not, you keep a casual face and sip your wine like it hasn't suddenly tasted like desperation. Tonight, it's not your name. You nod, smile, and look at the girl being called out with encouragement, even though your confidence quietly crawls under your pillow and cries. But the show must go on. You take off your jewelry. You remove your makeup. You shower again. This time to wash away hope, not sweat. You slip into pajamas and curl up on the rug, pretending to appreciate the quiet. Above you, the full moon hangs like a lazy ghost, totally indifferent somewhere. Music drifts down from upstairs rooms. You tell yourself, maybe tomorrow, because that's what keeps you here. Not certainty, just the ritual of not knowing. And in this place, uncertainty is the most intoxicating drug. When the palace falls silent and the oil lamps flicker out, Haram steps into its weirdest, most surreal world, dream time, where ambitions bloom wildly and reality politely excuses itself. You lie on the mat, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The linen canopy above flutters like a lazy ghost in the breeze. Around you, other concubines whisper softly, sharing strange visions they've recently had walking on lotus petals. Lion-headed pharaohs, birds speaking riddles, all poetic and a little crazy. But here's the thing in this palace. Dreams matter big time. The right dream can boost your status more than the best perfume on a thief. Nail the symbols. And suddenly, you're not just a concubine. You're a vessel of divine wisdom. Flub it. And you're the girl who claimed Ra wanted her to lead a poetry reading. You keep your own dream journal. It's a cracked little scroll hidden under your mattress. You jot down stuff like flooded courtyards, symbolizing bottled-up feelings, or Pharaoh smiling at me and then turning into a fish. Less clear, but definitely weird. If you find a priest who digs metaphors, this thing could land you real influence, or at least a better breakfast seat. Sometimes dreams are shared strategically. Recently, a girl dreamed the queen gave her lotus flowers. Everyone knows that didn't happen. But now she's invited to the queen's embroidery circle. That's the power of sleep illusions. They can deny and empower. You also dream you're getting promoted, doing more than just decorating. Owning land. Whispering advice to Pharaoh who actually listens. Sometimes you dream of just leaving. But then you remember. Outside the palace are fields, sandstorms, and husbands chewing with their mouths wide open inside. At least there's the illusion of opportunity. You roll over and whisper your latest dream to your friend. It involves a cat backing up and handing you a crown. She nods like, perfect, totally normal. Yeah, a real jerk. She says power's coming soon. You both pretend to believe it because here, dreams are currency. Papyrus is cheap, but hope, even if it's delusional, is the only free luxury. After your 14th shower and 29th birthday, you start wondering what real freedom even means. It's those occasional whispers, rare and never loud, from older concubines, usually after a few drinks. They stare toward the distant hill and mutter things like, I remember when I could go to market myself, or, back in the day, I picked my own hairstyle. And you nod respectfully, while trying to imagine a life where your biggest decision isn't which perfume to spray at sunset. In theory, you live in unimaginable luxury, silk, music, security, and meals that don't require you to scrape dirt off the floor. But in reality, you've got fewer choices than a basket of lentils. Want to leave the palace cute? Now you belong to it. Technically, you're not a prisoner. But try walking past guards with smudged eyeliner and see how far you get. Want to marry? Only if Pharaoh forgets you exist long enough to allow it ironically more parole than permission. Want to speak up? Only if it's a love song or a gentle prayer for the Nile to flow smoothly. Your job is to be admired, not heard. Your opinions are just decorations like bracelets, pretty but useless, yet inside this carefully stitched cage. Some women find just decoration like bracelets, pretty but totally useless, yet inside that cleverly stitched cage. Some women found a weird kind of freedom, of course. Not physical freedom, don't be ridiculous, but freedom of feelings. Politics. Society. The power to influence which poem gets read at court. Suggest consulting the priest. Whisper to the queen's cousin. And somehow change the royal banquet menu. Not much. But hey, something. You think about the country girl who used to chase goats. Tanned and dusty. She got freedom in the sense of going outside. Sure, but now You're free in knowing how to manipulate three noble families without lifting a finger. Better? You're not sure, but you know, freedom here was never handed out like candy. You earn it like everything else. And the better your performance, the less people suspect you actually have any freedom at all. Freedom here is never handed out like candy. It's earned, just like everything else. And the better your show, the fewer people suspect you're actually free. One day, you won't be around anymore. Maybe replaced by someone younger, shinier hair, and better at looting. Or maybe the pharaoh just loses interest and takes up falconry full time. Or maybe you'll be quietly shipped off to a rural villa, where you'll spend your days sipping watered-down wine and reminiscing about the time you almost got summoned until the queen's cousin had a headache. And then the real question hits, the one no one dares ask out loud. Will anyone even remember you? You won't have a statue. Statues are for gods, generals, and folks who invented new plows. Your name might show up somewhere in the palace ledgers. Line 34. Add lotus oil for the concubine. An indelible name. That's your grand historical legacy. Historians won't sing songs about you unless you die young and tragically, with poetic flair by a fountain. But even then, someone else might get the credit. Still, you hold on to hope. You hope the queen remembers you as the steady-handed one, or the girl who never flinched during eyeliner application. You hope one day one of the younger concubines will mimic your pose without even knowing it. You hope a servant whispers, "She once made the pharaoh laugh, like it mattered." Maybe that's all legacy really is. A few scattered memories drifting through someone else's afternoon. But on certain nights, especially ones scented with myrrh and moonlight perfectly hitting the garden, you let yourself imagine more. Maybe your name will surface on some forgotten scroll. Maybe a future scholar will read it centuries later and wonder who you were. Maybe they'll mispronounce it, spin a theory, or turn you into a dusty museum display with bad lighting and a misspelled plaque. Still, it matters, because you were here. You outplayed the competition. You mastered posture, deception, poetry, and silence in 5 languages. You turned obedience into performance and hope into strategy. You lived in a palace, even if it wasn't really yours. And in a world where most women never left the mud brick walls of their village, you became a whisper inside the king's palace. Maybe not immortality, but close enough. The party's over. The music fades. Nobles loosen belts and kick off shoes. But for the bride and groom, the most humiliating and important part of the wedding day is just getting started. In medieval Europe, marriage wasn't sealed with a kiss. It was sealed by witnesses, sheets, and often the presence of the in-laws. The wedding night, as they called it, wasn't a love fest. It was a legal ceremony, one that turned the bedroom into a courtroom and the bed into a contract. See, in the medieval world, sex wasn't private. It was political. A noble family needed an heir, and the heir needed proof. So, after the wedding feast, the whole community, or at least the nosiest and most powerful members, would escort the new couple to their room. And they didn't just stop at the door. They'd come in. If you were lucky, they'd just kick off your shoes, toast you, or sing a rowdy song before leaving. If not so lucky, they'd stick around long enough to see you naked, check the sheets, or entertain you with sarcastic advice and drunken cheers. Some families even demanded a bishop or midwife inspect the bride before or after to see if the deed was done. Why the intrusion? Because marriage wasn't a private union. It was a public contract. A noblewoman's virginity was political capital. A noble's ability to consummate was a legal duty. Without consummation, The marriage could be annulled, and without witnesses. It was your word against the world. Didn't matter if the bride was trembling, the groom drunk, or they barely knew each other. What mattered was someone saw or claimed to see the start of their married life. And if no one saw, the marriage might not count. Their first night together wasn't about cuddles or joy. Nope, it was about proof. And, usually, that proof came with an audience. And, folks, that was just the start of the show. After the last toast and the final dish was served, the newlyweds weren't left alone. Nope, they got an entourage, servants, relatives, priests, even wandering minstrels formed a parade escorting the couple to the honeymoon bed. And this wasn't a quiet, dignified farewell. It was a raucous, theatrical march, often loud, sometimes downright lewd, and utterly lacking in subtlety. The groom might be carried by friends, half-dragged, face flushed from too much wine or sheer terror. Meanwhile, the bride was usually pale, silent, and escorted by female relatives tasked with making sure she didn't run off or faint if she was a noblewoman. This was her first time as someone's property. If she was a peasant girl, it was still a public display of humility and obedience. Either way, it was a performance. And everyone had a role to play. And the music? Oh yes, there was music. Not some sweet romantic violin. Mind you, drums, flutes, and occasionally bawdy songs keeping time with every step. In France, it was called charivari, a noisy, mocking serenade designed to embarrass the couple and wish them a happy marriage. Think medieval welcome ceremony with a religious blessing. When the couple reached the bedroom, they didn't just walk in and shut the door. Instead, they were ceremoniously undressed, usually by relatives or servants. The groom might be stripped by a servant. The bride, gently or not, was undressed by bridesmaids or the housekeeper. Each layer removed was more than fabric. It was symbolic. Childhood gone. Control lost. Now, more precisely, these two belonged to each other, to the family alliance. In some places, a priest or bishop would give a final blessing on the bed, as if holiness could disinfect the awkwardness. Elsewhere, a glass of wine or spiced milk was passed between them, a last comfort before the main event. And the witnesses, they probably weren't leaving. Just that wasn't enough. Some hid behind curtains. Some stood near the door. A few, particularly determined folks, pressed their ears against the wood outside. In short, this was no gentle stroll into privacy. It was a forced parade stepping into adulthood, followed by cheers, songs, and uninvited stares. And the worst part, the wedding night was just getting started. If you hoped the crowd would quietly leave and let the couple awkwardly find their peace. Think again. In many medieval places, the idea of privacy on the wedding night was basically non-existent. The whole point of the ritual was to prove consummation. And in a world where land, power, and alliances were passed down through bloodlines, that proof had to be undeniable, even if it meant peeking through curtains or sitting in the corner of the room. To be clear, not all witnesses were intruders. In some traditions, nobles or village elders only escorted the couple to the bed, removed shoes, covered with blankets, prayed, then left. Symbolic enough to count. But in other cases, things went from symbolic to full-on nosy. Some royal courts demanded clergy, midwives, or housekeepers stay in the room just in case something went wrong or nothing happened at all. Some nobles even appointed official witnesses who would later sign the marriage completion certificate. These weren't your average wedding guests. They were the notaries of the wedding night. The message was crystal clear. You're not alone. And don't even think about faking it. Things got worse. There are stories, yes, real ones, about noble wedding nights where servants or family members would listen for certain sounds, watch movements under the bedclothes, or even inspect the sheets the next morning for signs of lost virginity, bloodstains, proof of purity and honor. A clean sheet could cause scandal and ruin a marriage. And if the bride was suspected not to be a virgin, the pressure doubled. She could be interrogated, examined, or even accused of witchcraft if things didn't go as planned. The groom wasn't off the hook either. If he failed his duty, especially in noble families, it could lead to lawsuits, church investigations, or diplomatic embarrassment. Of course, not every ceremony reached this absurd level. Peasants might have a slightly more comfortable experience, usually seeing guests off after a few jokes and some not-so-classy well wishes. But in the upper crust, where bloodlines are basically currency, not having public relations or trust could totally wreck the whole dynasty's master plan. Imagine you're stuck in a cold room next to someone you barely know, with faint whispers of relatives outside the door. Realizing your first intimate move is now court evidence. The door might have just slammed shut. Guests might have left, some reluctantly. But for the newlyweds, the real show's just getting started, and calling it romantic is ridiculously generous. For many brides, especially noble women, this is peak horror. The wedding night isn't about feelings, it's about duty. And often their first sexual experience, the groom, a stranger, the setting, an alien world, consent technically implied, but practically irrelevant. The whole thing is wrapped in pressure, pomp, and fear. One wrong move, hesitation, or flop, and family plans could come crashing down. The bed itself is the stage. In noble families, it's no ordinary bed. It's intricately carved, placed in a special room, often reserved just for this event. It might be decked out with symbols, pomegranates for fertility, lilies for purity, even religious icons nailed above the headboard, just in case divine intervention is needed to keep things smooth. And even if the couple's alone, their minds are far from private. The weight of expectations crushes down. Be polite, prove your manhood, bleed for your virtue, get the job done. The groom is expected to conquer his bride. The bride is expected to endure, no matter how painful, awkward, or terrifying. She's trained to be modest and silent. He's expected to be aggressive and efficient. For some couples, it goes smoothly, or as smoothly as possible in a cold, high-pressure environment. Others aren't so lucky. The groom might be too drunk, too nervous, or just clueless. The bride might cry, freeze, or pull back. And if the wedding night ends in failure, that failure echoes for months, if not years. In fact, there are recorded cases of kings and nobles being humiliated for failing to consummate their marriage. It's not just a bedroom thing. It becomes gossip, fodder, and political weakness. The whole marriage license thing hinged on consummation. Evidence, witnesses, rumors, and those all-important bed sheets. The bed wasn't a place to relax. It was a battleground of duty, achievement, and generational expectations. And for many, it left deeper psychological scars than any physical ones. If you thought the worst part of medieval wedding night rituals ended at the bedroom door, think again. Come morning, the real fun begins for everyone except the newlyweds. The first rays of sunlight don't just bring fresh air and chirping birds. They bring expectations, proof, evidence, and gossip. In many noble families, the bed sheets are more important than vows. And yes, someone definitely shows up to collect them. The bed inspector arrives. That could be a midwife, a lady in waiting, or, in royal circles, a senior female relative. Their job: check if there's blood on the sheets, proof the bride was still a virgin, and the marriage was done honorably. A red spot. Congratulations. No stain. That's a problem. Now, let's pause for a second. Medically speaking, virginity isn't exactly reliable evidence. The idea that all women bleed the first time is a myth. But try telling that to a medieval father-in-law fighting for his land inheritance. In his eyes, no blood means no virtue. No virtue means fraud. And fraud can void a marriage. So yeah, not having the right sheets could have serious consequences. Accused of deceit, publicly shamed, sometimes even dumped. It's a rigged system, and the woman bears the fallout. But even if the sheets pass inspection, the challenge isn't over. The couple is expected to appear together before the community or court. This appearance usually includes breakfast in bed, served by servants wearing smug smiles and knowing looks. Picture them sitting up, bleary-eyed, trying to sip watered-down booze, while the nobles smirk and silently judge your wedding night performance. In tiny villages, peasants might greet the couple with dirty songs or fertility dances. Think of it like a drunken mess, wrapped in reluctant applause. No matter your social class, the unspoken question remains, have you done it yet? And more importantly, did you do it right? And don't forget the gossip. Servants whisper, relatives murmur, even priests hint at things during sermons. One awkward glance or offhand comment could fuel rumors for years. Not every wedding night ended with blood-stained sheets and the mother-in-law's satisfaction. Sometimes, things went south. And in medieval society's rigid framework, a failed wedding night wasn't just awkward, it could be a disaster. First off, the whole consummation issue. If the groom couldn't perform due to nerves, drunkenness, or lack of experience, consequences came fast. Whispering started before the couple even left the room. A blushing groom was bad enough. A crying, disappointed bride. Even worse. By breakfast, rumors had spread through the castle walls. In some cases, this turned into a public investigation. Yes, public. Noble families with political alliances on the line couldn't risk ambiguity. If a prince couldn't get it up, that wasn't just a bedroom problem. That was a threat to the dynasty. Courts could summon midwives, doctors, even clergy to verify the groom's manhood. In France and England, there were actual lawsuits demanding the groom publicly prove his masculinity. One unlucky 16th century nobleman went through a full-blown investigation, including witness testimonies and medical exams, all because his bride claimed nothing happened. On the bride's side, failure to produce could lead to accusations of prior impurity. Whether true or not didn't matter. The stain was on her reputation, and her family's honor was at stake. Some desperate women faked evidence using animal blood or pricking their own fingers to stain the sheets. A risky move, but sometimes the only option. Then, the worst-case scenario annulment. If the marriage wasn't consummated, the church could declare it invalid. That meant the dowry could be returned, alliances broken, and the woman labeled as damaged goods. For noble women, this often meant exile to a convent. For commoners, public shame and social demotion. And in rare but real cases, violence erupted. An angry groom, humiliated and desperate to defend his honor, might accuse his wife of witchcraft, deceit, or adultery. Women got beaten, jailed, or worse, all because expectations weren't met. What started as a union ritual could end in separation, scandal, or even punishment. The wedding night wasn't just about sex. It was a public trial of body and reputation. And when the test failed, it left wreckage behind. Meanwhile, the basic idea of the wedding night ritual popped up all over medieval Europe. But the way it went down varied wildly by region. Every culture brought its own flavor, some quirky, some downright bizarre. For example, in Scandinavia, the ceremony often involved the bride being carried, sometimes upside down, over the bedroom threshold, symbolizing the switch from maidenhood to marriage. In more rustic traditions, the groom's friends might try to sabotage the ceremony with pranks, loud singing, or even locking the groom out of the room as a joke. Brotherhood has its limits. In Germany, the whole bed race thing actually wasn't rare. Yep. A wheeled bed dragged through the village with the newlyweds on it, while neighbors banged pots and pans to celebrate or mock them. The louder, the better. They believed the noise could ward off. In Ireland, things got even more symbolic. While waiting for Easter, guests often gathered outside the bedroom door, but the old ladies in the village, they'd hang around nearby, ready to offer charms, advice, or, less comforting, criticize the bride's childbearing hips. Meanwhile, in France, the whole bedroom business got a legal twist. At royal palaces, the bride and groom could literally sign documents right in bed, with a clergyman watching. And during those extra fancy ceremonies, nobles would theatrically draw the curtains like they're starring in a soap opera. Honestly, it kind of was. Spain leaned into Catholic symbolism. You could place a cross on the bed and say prayers before any physical activities started. The church wanted to remind you this wasn't just about passion. It was a sacred duty blessed by God. Passion? Well, that was up to you. Farmer's way, more chill. But still public? A whole village might follow the couple home with torches, singing outside the door, or even sneak over to knock in the middle of the night. Torches, singing songs outside the door, or even sneaking over to knock in the middle of the night. Romantic? No. community entertainment. Yes, wherever you were. One thing never changed. The wedding night wasn't just the couple's business. It involved family, the village, the church, and the law. The paperwork might differ. The songs might change, but the awkwardness, always the same. No matter how bizarre or strict medieval funerals were, they lived in a world full of contradictions. Sacred yet crude, solemn yet funny, serious yet weird. And amid all those rules, rituals, and superstitions, there was this undercurrent of unspoken behaviors everyone knew. No one admitted. For example, everyone knew grooms could be scared out of their minds. Masculinity was prized. But not every young man swaggered into the bedroom confident or experienced. If the guy couldn't rise to the occasion, folks quietly blamed nerves, too much booze, or even magic. Wives were advised to be patient, discreet, or both. Meanwhile, the bride had to stay silent, modest, and calm. But behind that closed door, she might cry, beg, or just shut down. These were taboo topics, never morning gossip or court jokes, but the moms, nurses, and older women prepping the bride knew all too well. Then came the humor. Because, of course, there was humor. Medieval life wasn't all doom and gloom. There was room for mockery and mischief. The wedding night was ripe for it. Drunk friends might swap the groom's nightshirt for a lady's robe. Pots might be hidden under the covers. In some places, guests tied bells to the bed so everyone knew when the main event happened. Crude, yes, but also a pressure valve for a ceremony about to explode. Even priests sometimes joined the joke, blessing the thinnest curtain with a double meaning. A line like, "May this union bear fruit at the right season," wasn't always said seriously. Then there were secret strategies. A nervous groom might rehearse with a prostitute weeks before the wedding night. A scared bride might get secret herbs to calm her nerves or ease pain. Midwives had all kinds of tips, from essential oils to gentle remedies. None of this was law, but these recipes passed down like family secrets. In short, the wedding night wasn't some stiff ritual. It was a chaotic dance of showmanship, pressure, and pretending. Beneath the fancy surface were fear, humor, empathy, and a fierce hope that anyone had done this before. The wedding night sounds savage by today's standards, but for centuries, it was the cornerstone ritual woven into marriage, law, and social identity. One night, one bed, one performance could decide a woman's worth, a man's pride, and a family's future. Even as the Middle Ages gave way to more refined societies, traces of these traditions stuck around. In Renaissance palaces across Europe, social status. One night, one bed, one performance could decide a woman's worth, a man's pride, and a family's future. Even as the Middle Ages gave way to fancier societies, traces of this tradition lingered. In Renaissance European palaces, public beds were more symbolic, but they didn't vanish. At some royal weddings, kings and queens were still tucked into bed by bishops and noblewomen, witnessed by a crowd blowing out candles, a theatrical nod to an old custom. But the hidden meaning was still alive. In rural villages, especially in Eastern Europe, versions of this ritual lasted all the way into the 19th century. Bed linens got inspected, songs were sung, and the couple performed in front of the community. Privacy, luxury not included. And the couple still performed in front of the whole community. Privacy, that was a luxury for folks not expected to produce heirs or follow tradition. The church made sure to keep these odd customs alive too. Church law stressed that sex was the real seal of marriage, not just the vows. Sometimes couples just said the words and skipped the deed but to God. That was like they weren't even married. A secret hookup in the woods. Invalid. A public bed, confirmed by witnesses, solid as a rock. Probably the wildest part, a lot of these ideas still echo today. Just sneakier. The obsession with virginity. The pressure for a perfect honeymoon night. The expectation that love must be proven immediately and preferably on camera. Medieval wedding nights might be history, but their ghost haunts our wedding jitters and society's judgments on sex and marriage. For medieval couples, that night was more than a ritual. It was a brutal test, a shared trauma, a moment burned into memory. No matter how their marriage went afterward, some bonded through the absurdity. Others got hurt by the pressure, but all of them, nobles or peasants, willing or terrified, got dragged into a night. That wasn't romantic. It was a ritual, a performance, a survival challenge. The bed stopped being about love and became a stage. And history was watching. If you lived in medieval Europe and got a toothache, you were in big trouble. Because dental care, nope, didn't exist. No recognizable form at all. Your teeth just had to tough it out on their own. No toothbrush, no toothpaste, no dentist, and bacteria. What's that? Your mouth was just another hole in your face, and if something went wrong, you dealt with it like any other pain. Grit your teeth and pray to Saint Apollonia, patron saint of toothaches. The average medieval diet didn't help either. Rough bread, often mixed with bits of stone, ground up with crappy flour. Meat was common, but rarely fresh. And veggies were boiled into oblivion. Sugar wasn't the enemy, yet it was actually rare in most of Europe. But decay happened fast. By your mid-20s, your smile might look like a haunted graveyard, crooked, yellowed, missing some key residents, got a cavity. No cleaning. It just got worse. The pain started dull, then turned into a relentless nightmare. Infection could swell your jaw, cloud your mind, and in the worst case, kill you. Yep, kill you. Dental abscesses could be fatal if the infection spread to your blood or brain. But back then, nobody knew that if you died. Everyone assumed divine punishment, not bacteria munching you from the inside out. To ease the pain, you might get herbal pulp to swallow. If you had some cash, maybe a mouthwash with honey and vinegar sweet, acidic, and totally useless. They might even stick a hot stick near your cheek to suck out the bad stuff. At best, a distraction. Worse, it made infections worse. Eventually, someone, maybe your mom, the priest, or a wise village woman would look at you and say, "Time to speak up." And that was medieval dental care in a nutshell. Yank it out. Don't fix it. Don't heal it. Just rip it out and pray. And that's where things get interesting. With no actual dentists around, pulling rotten teeth fell to people with flexible skills. In medieval times, if you wanted a tooth pulled, your options were slim and no one had a license. You didn't go to a dentist. Those didn't exist yet. Medieval flexibility levels required. If you needed a tooth pulled in the Middle Ages, your options were slim and zero licensed. No dentist visits. That profession didn't even exist. Instead, you'd stroll into the local barber surgeon shop, a guy who could cut hair, lance boils, chop off legs, and tear your leg open before lunch. Barber surgeons were the working-class docs of their day. No university degrees here. No anatomy lessons with monks or Latin debates on medicine. They learned on the job, usually apprenticing under other barbers who taught them two essentials: how to sharpen blades and how to keep someone alive long enough to attack them again later. Pulling teeth was considered a messy, painful, lowly surgery, unworthy of university-trained doctors. So barbers took over. Their tools were basic but terrifying iron clamps, long-handled pincers, hooked tools, and sometimes their bare fingers, none of it sterilized. If you were lucky, the tools got wiped on a rag between patients. If not, they still dripped with someone else's blood. No anesthesia. A barber surgeon might offer a stiff drink, a leather strap to bite, or a prayer. You'd sit in a chair or just stand there, hoping you don't lose your cool. Some barbers worked fast, yanking the rotten tooth out in one brutal yank. Others needed several tries. If the tooth broke mid-pull, they'd dig out the roots with a hooked tool. No surprise that this caused screams, flailing, and fainting. But barber surgeons weren't just meat sellers. Many took pride in their craft. Some became so famous for dental work, they toured from village to village like rock stars of oral pain. They'd set up stalls in market squares with signs boasting their skills. A popular trick was displaying freshly pulled teeth on a string or hammered into posts. Proof of experience, if not hygiene. Did patients complain? Rarely, because in medieval minds, toothache pain was worse than anything a guy with pincers could dish out. Plus, if your barber messed up, there was no dental board to file a complaint with. The barber surgeon was more than just a meat vendor. Many took pride in their trade. Some got so famous for their dentistry that they toured from village to village like rock stars of oral pain. They set up shop in market squares with signs advertising their skills. A popular tactic was displaying freshly pulled teeth strung on a cord or nailed to posts. Proof of experience, if not hygiene. Did patients complain? Rarely, because in the medieval mind, toothache was worse than anything a man with pliers could dish out. Plus, if your barber screwed up, there was no dental board to file complaints with. Not every medieval person waited for a cavity to act. There were strange, bold, often questionable efforts to keep mouths clean. And the most important tool for medieval dental care was toothpaste. Forget your shiny peppermint tubes. Medieval toothpaste came in little ceramic jars or linen pouches. Recipes varied wildly depending on region, wealth, and desperation. But common ingredients included crushed bones, burnt bread crusts, herbal powders, and ash. Some folks added crushed oyster shells, pumice, or charcoal for extra grit. Basically, it was like brushing your teeth with. People used rags, fingers, or if you were fancy, a crude toothbrush made from twigs or pig bristles to apply the powder. Nobody really understood germs or enamel back then, so the goal wasn't killing bacteria. It was more about scrubbing off dirt and freshening your breath. If your mouth smelled like a corpse, you were probably unlucky, sinful, or worse French. Mint, sage, rosemary, and salt were popular add-ons, not for hygiene, mind you, but to mask the stench. Because nothing says romance like covering up rot to make kissing slightly less gross. The upper class could import exotic spices like cinnamon or cloves, crush them into powder, and mix them in. Farmers' charcoal and bone dust did just fine. Then there's honey. Yes, honey. Darling. Some medical texts actually recommended filling cavities with honey. reasoning that it's naturally antibacterial. Sure, it is, but it's also sticky and loaded with sugar. So the end result was basically pouring syrup on your wound. It might soothe the pain briefly, but sped up decay like nobody's business. Still, it was one of their better ideas. Other remedies took a nosedive into the absurd. Some quacks swore that powdered rat skull, boiled dog milk, and even rinsing with urine could cure toothaches. Did they work? Of course not. But when your gums are throbbing and your jaws swollen, you'll try anything. Bottom line, medieval dental care was less about prevention, more about survival. If your breath didn't kill your social life, at least this powder probably wore down your enamel all the way to the nerve. Hey, at least you tried. When medieval medicine flopped pretty often, they turned to plan B magic, religion, or both, because if crushed bone powder and honey jammed into a cavity couldn't fix it, maybe God or a lucky charm under your pillow could. In medieval minds, tooth pain wasn't always about bad hygiene. It could be punishment for sin, evil spirits at work, or even the result of toothworms. Yep, worms. Lots of folks genuinely believed tiny creatures burrowed into their teeth and skipped the roots. Some swore they'd seen them. Others thought the painful throbbing was worms squirming inside. To kill these imaginary invaders, you could try smoke. A popular folk remedy was to blow hot smoke from burning deadly nightshade seeds straight into the mouth. Great idea. Right, the worms would flee the heat and die. More likely, your gums would blister and your breath would become lethal. Then there were toothache charms, usually written on parchment and worn around the neck. People believed Latin prayers, astrological symbols, or even nonsense scribbles could heal. If that didn't work, you could always pray to a martyred saint who'd had all her teeth pulled and became the patron saint of dental patients. Her image was carried in pockets, carved into church walls, or worn as amulets by those clutching their cheeks in agony. The church tried to walk the line between superstition and salvation. Monks often acted as doctors in monasteries, handing out herbal remedies and prayers. Some medieval medical texts, penned by clergy, advised fasting and confession as ways to cleanse bodily fluids and ease tooth pain. Others just told you to donate and beg God's mercy. For wealthy patients, the church sometimes gifted relics to heal, like a saint's bone, holy oil, or a real piece of the cross. Just hold it near your molar and wait. You might still die from sepsis, but hey, at least you'd go out spiritually clean. Some medieval medical texts, written by clergy, advised fasting and confession as ways to cleanse bodily fluids and ease tooth pain. Others told you to offer sacrifices and beg God's mercy. For wealthy patients, churches sometimes handed out relics to heal a saint's bone, holy oil, or a real piece of the cross. Just hold it near the molar and wait. You might still die of sepsis, but at least you'll die spiritually clean. At the end of the day, when no powder, plier, or prayer worked, the medieval mouth became a battleground between faith and infection, a fight neither side won. In the medieval world, pain wasn't just inevitable, it was something to endure, like bad weather or your in-laws. No anesthesia, no Novocaine, and definitely no soothing ocean sounds playing during treatment. Pain was expected. In some ways, it was even respected. Pulling teeth wasn't a quiet clinical procedure. It was a painful public performance. Pain was expected. Heck, in some twisted way, it was even respected. Pulling teeth wasn't a quiet little medical procedure. It was a public pain show. Picture this. You're slumped on a wobbly wooden chair, cheeks swollen, mouth wide open, while some guy in a bloody apron digs around with iron tongs. No sedatives, no antiseptics. Maybe a shot of hard liquor if you're lucky, or a prayer if you're not. The barber surgeon grabs the offending tooth and yanks, twists, or wedges it out. If it breaks, which it often did, they just keep digging. The pain could be so brutal it made people faint or vomit. Some bit their lips raw, trying not to scream. Others got physically restrained by helpers or family. But they still went through with it, because, as awful as it was, the pain from a rotten tooth was even worse. Some barber surgeons prided themselves on minimizing the agony. They worked fast and confident, like medieval cowboys. Others just winged it. Records mention broken teeth, dislocated jaws, or chunks of gum ripped out. If the wound got infected afterward, which was often you were stuck with it or worse. Some dentists even bragged about treating multiple patients in a row with the same dirty tools. No boiling, no wiping, not even a rinse. Bacteria passed from mouth to mouth like a cursed relay baton. Cross-infection was not a thing yet, and if you got an abscess after the extraction, guess what? You were back on that chair, this time begging someone to stab the swollen spot with a knife. So why did people put up with it? Because the pain of doing nothing was just unbearable. In an era when prayers, honey, and bone dust didn't work, brute force was the only option left. Pain was just part of the survival bill. No anesthesia, no apologies, just guts, willpower, and a bucket of blood. Not every dental horror happened in a dark room. Actually, some of the loudest screams came from village squares, right between the sausage stall and the goose vendor, performed by nomadic tooth pullers. Not trained pros, but showmen and traveling salesmen moving from town to town, setting up makeshift stalls at fairs and market days. They wore flashy clothes, carried huge pliers, and claimed they could cure everything from toothaches to heartbreak. Some even carried fake papers, scrolls written in Latin no one could read, or fake gold-plated instruments. Their game was simple: gather a crowd, put on a spectacle, then yank a few teeth. They'd start loud, boasting about their miracle cure and gentle hands. Sometimes they'd have fake assistants play the role of instantly cured patients. The crowd, loving free entertainment and a little schadenfreude, would cheer, heckle, and egg on the next unlucky victim. The poor soul, actually in pain. And the show was on. The pulled tooth was held up like a trophy. Blood. Oh yeah, that was part of the thrill. The louder the screams, the more legit the guy looked. After the extraction, the tooth puller sold homemade potions, herbal tonics, clove-soaked rags, or mystery powders to fight cavities. Usually just a mix of spices and booze, but it left a nice aftertaste. Whether they helped or not didn't really matter. The crowd went home happy. The toothless staggered off dizzy, and the tooth puller's pockets jingled with coins. Some had surprisingly good skills. Others left behind broken teeth, cracked lips, and lawsuits, if lawsuits even existed back then. Either way, they served their purpose, in places with no barber surgeons and monasteries miles away. These guys were the last resort, quick, dirty, and unforgettable. So next time you're sitting in an air-conditioned office staring at your dentist's shiny tools, just remember it could be way worse. So next time you're chilling in a dentist's air-conditioned office, staring at that spinning polishing tool, remember you might actually be stuck in a muddy village square, surrounded by chickens, while some guy in a feathered hat parades your hat around to a cheering crowd. If you think having royal blood means your teeth get better care, think again. Medieval kings might have had gold, jewels, and castles, but their teeth, oh, they were just as awful as anyone else's, sometimes even worse. The upper class had more food, sure, but not exactly healthier options. Nobles chowed down on sweet meats, dried fruit, white bread, and wine basically a dental disaster waiting to happen. Sugar was rare but fancy, imported all the way from the east. When sugar hit the noble kitchens, it got dumped into pies, sauces, and preserved fruit like there was no tomorrow. Result rot, cavities, and breath that could slay dragons. History notes a bunch of royals with serious dental nightmares. Rumor has it, King Henry VI had teeth that were black and loose enough to wiggle. Catherine de' Medici was known for chronic tooth decay and bad breath, probably from chewing cloves stuffed for years on end. And if you were a noblewoman, good luck. Beauty standards demanded pale skin, tiny waists, and a tightly closed mouth, because smiles could spill all the ugly secrets. Your mouth was basically a disaster zone. What did the nobles do? Well, they could see the best barber surgeon around, a.k.a the guy who'd yank their teeth out, but hey, at least they had nicer clothes. Teeth pulled by a guy dressed better than you. Queen Elizabeth. I was famous for terrifying toothaches. She was so scared of pulling teeth that one of her bishops actually pulled a rotten tooth right in front of her to prove it wasn't so bad. Didn't work. She refused treatment until nobles also tried to hide their dental disasters with makeup tricks. Some whitened their teeth with lead powder, yeah, the stuff that's super toxic. Others chewed mints to mask the stink. Mouth perfume. Can you imagine? No wonder flirting mostly happened through letters. In portraits, royal smiles are rare. Not an artistic choice, just reality. Flashing a full set of teeth. And if your mouth looked like a war zone with chipped enamel, better keep those lips sealed. So while peasants screamed in the village square and merchants stuffed honey into their wine, the royals suffered behind velvet curtains, hiding awkward smiles behind jewels, etiquette, and pure denial, while tooth pulling and tooth power dominated the drama of medieval dentistry. Everyday life was full of weird habits, stubborn myths, and surprisingly practical routines if you knew where to look. Let's start with the basics. Most people didn't brush teeth like we do now, but that doesn't mean they did nothing. Chewing sticks were super popular, especially among the poor. Twigs from fragrant trees like witch hazel, juniper, or tamarind were frayed at one end and used to scrub teeth. Think of it as a primitive toothbrush with built-in flavor. Not great at fighting cavities, but still better than letting roast goose sit on your teeth for 3 days. Mouthwash was also a big deal. People rinsed with vinegar, wine, or even urine. Yep, urine. Believed to clean the mouth and kill invisible nasties thanks to its warmth and acidity. Monks recorded recipes mixing red wine, cloves, and sage, boiled and cooled to make mouthwash, almost spicy and antiseptic. Then there were the myths. Some folks believed rubbing crushed emeralds or pearls on teeth would whiten them. Others thought kissing a donkey, yes, a donkey, could cure toothaches. The logic pain transfer? Some believed spider webs stuffed into molars would catch and trap the pain. The spiders, not thrilled. Bad breath was a huge concern, especially for the upper class. Bad breath wasn't just terrible. It was seen as a sign of moral decay. So people chewed fennel, cloves, and star anise to keep breath fresh at public events. court hearings, or confessions. They wanted to smell fresh at public events. Court hearings or confessions. The irony, a lot of the stuff they chewed, like sugar-coated nuts, actually caused the tooth decay they were desperately hiding. Kids were taught from day one that a toothache was punishment for lying or overeating. Some had to pray every time they ate sweets. Others got lucky charms to wear through teething tiny bone fragments, bits of coral, or amulets engraved with prayers. So, while dental science was still a few centuries away, medieval folks did what they could, armed with superstition, sticks, and stubbornness. They cleaned their teeth the best they could, fending off cavities with home remedies, prayers, and anything not found in the herb garden. By the late Middle Ages, diets across Europe were a hot mess. But something started to shift, slowly, painfully, and full of trial and error. Medieval dentistry began its long, bumpy journey toward actually becoming a science. The seeds of change came from a few brave, or maybe just crazy individuals who figured maybe pulling every tooth wasn't the only way. Late medieval and early Renaissance manuscripts started showing drawings of teeth, jaws, and even crude dental tools. Arabic medical texts, especially those by Avicenna and Al-Zahrawi, were translated and spread, bringing smarter ideas about oral hygiene and anatomy. Ideas way beyond bone powder and barber scissors. Monasteries also began keeping better records. Monks noted what treatments worked, refined herbal mouthwashes, and even tracked which patients survived tooth extractions and which didn't. Trial and error was brutal. But hey, data's data. By the 14th and 15th centuries, barber surgeons started branching out. Some went full surgeon. Others focused on mouth surgery. The idea of a tooth specialist was born. Not respected, not licensed, but at least recognized as different from the guy who just shaved your face. Cities began regulating these street tooth pullers, forcing them to register or get permits. Some were even banned from pitching tents in public squares. The days of yanking teeth next to sausage vendors were fading fast. The focus shifted from spectacle to hygiene, though hygiene mostly meant washing hands with booze and hoping for the best. And maybe the biggest change, people started fearing bad teeth more than tooth pain. Mouth aesthetics began gaining social acceptance. By the Renaissance, white teeth were a beauty sign, not just a health thing. Fancy-smelling powders and crushed coral polish became all the rage among nobles. Smiles and portraits, even quick flashes of them, started making a cautious comeback. Sure, real dentistry with drills, fillings, and anesthesia was still centuries away. But the path was set. The era of barber surgeons and traveling tooth pullers was winding down. So next time, you lean back in that cushy chair, numb and comfy. Just remember, you're sitting on centuries of progress. Remember, your dental experience today is built on a medieval mountain, dragged around by tongs in a chicken-filled market. And somehow, humanity survived. With most teeth intact, life on the Mongolian steppe was brutal. Freezing winters, blazing summers, constant wind, and no fixed kitchen. Food had to do more than just fill you up. It had to be portable, durable, and quick. Mongol warriors didn't sit down for long meals. They ate on the move, on horseback, sometimes right in the saddle, always thinking survival. Meat was king, especially lamb, goat, and horse. But not the kind you'd see sizzling by the campfire every night. Most of it was air-dried, often in long, thin strips called borts. This dried meat was a masterpiece of efficiency. It shriveled into leathery strips, nearly weightless, could last for months, and could be soaked in boiling water for a hot meal anywhere, whether on campaign or in the middle of nowhere. Horses weren't just for riding, they were dinner too. A wounded or old horse was never wasted. Horse meat was considered warming and nutritious, perfect for the cold, dry climate. But more importantly, horses were mobile food storage. Mongols could ride with a bag of milk tied to the saddle and a milk source right underneath their horse. That milk eventually became arag, fermented mare's milk, both a drink and a cultural symbol. It's sour, fizzy, slightly alcoholic, and deeply tied to Mongol identity. A warrior could milk a horse, ferment the liquid in a leather bag hanging from the saddle, and drink it all within a day or two. No bottles, no brewing vats, just pure creative survival. Grains and veggies were rare on the wide open plains. Mongol nomads didn't farm. They herded, so bread, grains, and fruit weren't daily staples. Instead, they relied on animal fat, meat, milk, cheese, and yogurt to survive. Even blood was used in emergencies, drawn from a horse's neck with a small cut, then sealed, keeping both horse and rider alive on the move. This wasn't cuisine designed for pleasure. It was made for conquest. Small, sturdy, high-calorie, and portable, just like the warriors who ate it. And it fueled the rise of one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen. If there's a drink that captures the Mongol spirit literally and figuratively, it's arag, also called kumis in some areas. This fizzy fermented milk is not just a beverage. It's a symbol of identity, strength, hospitality, and sometimes survival. To make arag, Mongols milk. Mares, yes. Mares up to 6 times a day in summer months. Then the milk gets poured into a leather bag, usually animal hide, and hung at the yurt door or on the saddle. It never gets left alone. People constantly stir the bag, sometimes with hands, sometimes by having kids run through and kick or punch it as they pass. Fermentation needs motion, and Mongols have plenty of that. After a day or two, the milk sours and bubbles up, turning into a mildly alcoholic, sour, cloudy drink strong enough to lift the spirits of a tired rider. Arag isn't distilled like vodka. It's raw, rustic, and packed with bacteria that'd make modern health inspectors sweat. But to Mongols, it's the nectar of life. Arag serves many purposes. It quenches thirst. It packs calories and delivers a buzz that Mongol warriors describe as sharpening focus rather than making you sleepy. When it's hot, it cools you down. When cold, it warms you up. At parties, there's usually plenty poured. During negotiations, bowing while drinking is the norm. Refusing a sip isn't just rude, it's a deep insult. Traditionally, visitors to a Mongol camp are welcomed. When negotiating, people usually bowed. Saying no wasn't just rude, it was a deep insult. Traditionally, visitors to a Mongol camp were welcomed with a shallow, silver bowl of arag. You had to take at least a sip, even if it made your tongue want to run away. Outsiders often described it as smoky vinegar whipped with yogurt or spoiled milk. But for the Mongols, this was sacred, and no feast, no matter how big, was complete without it. There were plenty of variations. Old Arag could be distilled into a stronger spirit called airy, clearer, sharper, and definitely not for the faint-hearted. This was the Mongol version of liquor, used in celebrations, and sometimes even in medicine. In short, Arag wasn't just fermented milk. It's the fuel for their conquests, a diplomatic tool, and a cultural cornerstone. Mongolian cuisine. It tastes like sour, spicy, and unforgettable. The Mongol army didn't conquer half the world on an empty stomach. Their battlefield rations were brutal, minimal, and efficient, just like their campaigns. Forget army mess halls or supply convoys. Mongol warriors carried their food with them, sometimes tucked in saddlebags, sometimes under the saddle, keeping it warm on the move. The most vital grub was Bart's booze. Thin slices of dried meat, usually lamb or horse, hung out in the open air until they got tough and leathery. Think jerky, but without the fancy spices or sugar, lightweight and packed with nutrition. Bort beans could be eaten raw, like trail mix, or boiled into a simple soup. A handful could keep you going all day, but the Mongols didn't stop at meat. They loved fat too, especially in the form of sweet cakes or dumplings made from melted sheep fat, flour, and sometimes dried cheese. These calorie bombs were dense, rich, and packed enough energy to fuel a galloping horse. They didn't melt, spoil, or crumble. You could ride for days with one tucked into your sleeve. In colder regions, warriors also sipped broth made from boiled animal bones, a nutrient-rich oil that kept them warm and energized during long campaigns. Combined with dried meat and fat, it created a rustic stew that could be quickly heated over a fire or even by dropping hot stones into a pot of water. For longer marches, warriors sometimes mixed bort with water in a bottle and let it soak all day. By night, they had a makeshift soup without having to stop and cook. Not delicious, but effective in emergencies. Mongol soldiers had a gruesome backup plan. They'd slit a horse's neck vein, drink the blood, and sew it back up. Horse lives, rider lives. Campaign goes on. No fancy sauces, no spices, no gourmet meals. Mongol warrior food wasn't meant to be enjoyed. It was designed to keep you alive while you galloped thousands of miles across rough terrain. And boy, did it do that with brutal minimalist precision? When the Mongols weren't storming far-off cities or riding across borders, they actually settled down, at least temporarily. And when they did, cooking shifted from wild improvisation to a steadier, though still minimal, routine. Inside the jur, a traditional Mongolian yurt, which wasn't just a house, but a mobile fortress made of felt and wood, built to withstand howling winds. Inside, the space was arranged with almost sacred order. The door always faced south. The fire burned in the middle, right under where all the cooking happened. The kitchen was basically a metal tripod, a few cast iron pots, and some wood, dried dung, or animal fat for fuel. Mongolian women usually handled the cooking. They didn't follow recipes, they chased survival. The most common method was boiling. Meat was chopped up, plenty of fat thrown in, and everything simmered in rich broth. No spices, just the taste of meat, fat, and sometimes fermented dairy. Salt was precious and used sparingly. A favorite dish was bog, made by stuffing hot stones into a deboned marmot or goat, tying it up tight. and letting it cook from the inside out. Pretty crude, but the result? Tender, juicy meat with a smoky flavor. It was messy, over the top, and undeniably Mongolian in style. In the colder months, milk was turned into curds, yogurt, and cheese. You could eat it fresh or dry it into hard discs that lasted for months. The dried curd, called aru, was so tough it could crack your teeth, but packed a punch nutritionally. Kids gnawed on them like candy. A favorite dish was bog, a specialty made by stuffing hot stones into a boned-out marmot or goat, tying it up tight, and cooking it from the inside out. It's pretty rustic, but the result is tender. Juicy meat with a smoky flavor, messy, showy, and undeniably Mongol style. During colder months, milk was turned into curds, yogurt, and cheese. You could eat them fresh or dry them into hard discs that lasted for months. The dried curd fruit, called aru, was so tough it could crack your teeth, but it was nutritious, and kids gnawed on it like candy. Meals in Ajir were communal, usually eaten by hand with everyone sitting on the floor. Meat passed hand to hand. Broth slurped straight from the bowl, and fingers licked clean. Cleanliness was practical. Knives wiped on sleeves. Leftovers tossed to dogs or saved for the next meal. Though simple, the Jer's kitchen was the heart of Mongol family life. It was where survival met routine, where a day's hunt became dinner, and where nomad families might feel close in the blink of an eye, even though the ground beneath them is always shifting. For the average Mongol, food is just fuel. But at the royal court, those warriors who once lived off dried mutton and fermented milk on the steppe became the patrons of lavish multicultural banquets under the silken tents of the court. At the Mongol Empire's peak, especially under Kublai Khan's reign, the kitchen upgraded from campfire to culinary theater. The empire stretched from Hungary to Korea, and so did its pantry. Chefs came from Persia, China, India, and beyond. Each brought their own flavors, techniques, and ingredients to the royal table. The Mongol court feast was a wild contrast to the harsh life outside. There was roasted mutton, whole spit-roasted birds, and spiced meat-stuffed pastries. Chinese chefs whipped up delicate dumplings and rice dishes. Persian cooks served rich stews, dates, nuts, and saffron-scented flatbreads. Occasionally, Indian spices made a cameo. Dill, Egyptian dill, and pepper were carried by merchants along the Silk Road. Drinks flowed freely, especially Arag fermented mare's milk, but also wine from the Caucasus, Chinese rice wine, and stronger spirits distilled into something called a rye. Golden and silver cups passed hand to hand as performers entertained. Singers, acrobats, even trained animals. The highlight towers of cooked meat, sometimes carved into dragons, warriors, or horses. It was the ultimate flex of imperial wealth and power. Keep that feast well fed, and you could conquer anything. But even amid all this luxury, Mongol food values remained intact. Meat was king, milk sacred, and waste was taboo. Lamb cuts still shared the table with fancy dishes. Bowls of broth were offered before and after meals, symbolizing the humble origins of nomads now lounging on silk cushions. What made the Mongol court feast truly unique wasn't just the amount of food. It was the unity. The empire's expansion turned the kitchen into a diplomatic banquet, a testament to diversity maintained by the unshakable will of a people fed on boiled fat and fermented milk. Dining with Khan wasn't just about eating. It was tasting the empire itself in the Mongol Empire. Food wasn't just nourishment or celebration. It was a diplomatic weapon. A bowl of broth or a cup of fermented mare's milk could pack more punch than any treaty scroll. Sitting down with a Mongol leader wasn't mere hospitality. It was recognition, a ritual of loyalty, and a test of mutual respect. Diplomatic moves started with food. Foreign envoys and traders arriving at Mongol camps or courts weren't rushed to Khan right away. First, they ate. Ira flowed freely. Lamb soup was served. The quality and sequence of dishes said it all. That guest was honored. Whether the Mongols saw them as friend or someone to watch closely, food shortages, especially of arag, were a diplomatic disaster. Refusing to drink with Mongols was taken as distrust or arrogance. Worse, it could suggest disgust. Insulting nomad food was like insulting their very identity. Many negotiations ended just because some European court rep refused to sip sour milk on the doorstep. Talks evaporated instantly. But for those who played the game, the rewards were huge. Merchants shared their own delicacies, dried fruits from Persia, dates from Baghdad, wine from Armenia, often welcomed, protected, and granted special trading rights. The Mongols appreciated novelty, but only if it was shown with humility. Feasts were often used to seal alliances, marriages, military pacts, and vassal appointments happened over long tables. Things got a bit more humble. Feasts were basically alliance-building parties, marriages, military pacts, and new vassal appointments all happened around long tables, piled high with racks of lamb and bowls of boiled dumplings. Guests were expected to eat their fill, not just out of politeness, but as proof that they could handle life under Mongol rule. Food was also a subtle test. Ambassadors might be invited to try a slice of shoulder meat, which was an honor seat. But if the meat came from the rump, that was a polite way of saying, "You're not that important." A bowl of rich broth showed respect. A bowl of thin milk, bare minimum. In the Mongol world, diplomacy started with your teeth. To survive, you had to know when to chew and when to toast, and when to politely nod along while chewing a chunk of boiled fat. For nomads, always on the move, food preservation isn't just smart, it's life or death. No pantries, no grocers, no markets. Mongols had to make their diets portable and long-lasting. And guess what? They nailed it using only wind, sun, salt, smoke, and a heaping dose of practicality. The most iconic preservation trick was air drying. Meat, especially lamb or horse, was sliced thin and hung on lines between yurts or saddles. The cold, dry Mongolian air did the rest in just a few days. The meat lost most of its moisture and turned into borts, the protein-packed travel snack of champions. If dried right, it could last months, even years. Without spoiling, this borts could be ground to powder, mixed with water for a quick soup, tossed into dumpling dough, or just chewed like jerky. It's light, compact, and practically indestructible. Perfect for horse warriors galloping across the Gobi Desert or deep into enemy territory. Milk was preserved with equal finesse. It was churned into butter, then clarified and stored as fat blocks. Yogurt was dried into a thing called aru. Rock-hard cheese could be eaten as is or softened in broth. These weren't snacks. They were edible insurance policies to survive brutal winters or failed hunts. Fermentation was another trick. Like we saw with a rag, horse milk turned into a fizzy, alcoholic drink, but cow, goat, and sheep milk were also fermented into yogurt and sour cream, then stored in leather pouches or jars. These acidic products stopped spoilage and added valuable probiotics. Mongols didn't know about probiotics, of course, but they knew it worked. Salting and smoking were used when possible, especially near rivers or forests. Fish could be smoked and tied to saddles. Animal guts were often boiled and preserved in fat to prevent spoilage, basically rustic Tupperware. Storage was an invention too. Mongols used leather bags, felt bundles, and even empty animal stomachs to carry food. Saddlebags doubled as transport and kitchen cabinets. No clay pots, no glass jars, just whatever you could lash to your horse and forget until mealtime. In short, Mongols mastered the art of long-lasting food preservation without ever stopping to rest. It wasn't fancy, but it kept them fed, fierce, and always on the move. For Mongols, food wasn't just fuel or pleasure. It was wrapped up in ritual, superstition, and social rules. What you ate, how you ate it, and who you shared it with said a lot about your place in the world. And some foods were definitely not to be taken lightly. Mongol spiritual beliefs came from Tangism, an ancient religion which built a special relationship with food. Animals weren't just meat on your plate. They were sacred life sources. Every part had its own role. Wasting food wasn't just wasteful, it was spiritually dangerous. For example, blood was both the essence of life and taboo. Horse blood could be drunk in emergencies, but spilling blood inside the family tent was considered deeply impure. Ideally, animals were carefully slaughtered outdoors, and the meat shared evenly among the group to keep balance and respect. The fire inside the tent used for cooking was sacred. You didn't throw bones in it. No yelling or swearing near the flame, and absolutely no stepping over it. It was believed that doing so offended the spirits and brought bad luck not just to you, but to the whole camp. Some foods were outright forbidden. Dog meat, for instance, was taboo among Mongols. Unlike some neighboring cultures, fish was rarely eaten despite the many. Rivers and lakes. Why water spirits? Fishing was seen as disturbing the path of souls, both good and bad. Eating water creatures could attract unwanted attention from the other side. Leftover food was handled very carefully. Leftovers were never tossed around. Bones were buried or fed to animals. Liquids were never poured into the fire or spilled on the ground near the tent. Everything had its place, because everything could offend something invisible. Then there's hospitality, which was basically another form of religion. Inviting guests to eat, even strangers, was non-negotiable. Refusing meat or milk, even if you were starving, wasn't just rude, it was a massive embarrassment. Hospitality was basically survival. On the vast, empty steppe, it might be the only thing keeping you from starving in a snowstorm. In Mongolian culture, every bite mattered. Food wasn't just survival, it was spirit, order, and honor. The Mongol Empire might have fallen, but their cuisine jumped ahead of its time, leaving marks from Eastern Europe to China, from the Middle East to Siberia. As the empire expanded, so did the recipes. Ingredients and attitudes toward food. Simple, practical, portable, and all about the meat. Take dumplings, for example. You can find all kinds of stuffed dough across former Mongol lands, manti in Central Asia, pelmeni in Russia, baozi in China, and good old Mongol booze. They vary in size and flavor, but share one idea: minced meat wrapped in dough. Easy to batch cook and super portable. You could say the Mongols helped these recipes spread and evolve beyond borders. Fermented milk left a mark too. The tradition of drinking yogurt like kefir in the Caucasus or ayran in Turkey shows the Mongols' legacy of milk preservation. The nomads at the top of the step ladder believed in the power-boosting magic of yogurt. That belief hasn't faded. It adapted. Even today, travelers across Central Asia still run into modern cousins of ayran, some fizzy, some pungent. Stews and skewers from roast lamb to Siberian game soups all remind you of a Mongol campfire meal. Light on spices, heavy on meat and fat. With barely any grains, that's the culinary signature of steppe life. Even Persian shashlik, now all about bold marinades, grew up during Mongol rule when meat on a stick became royal fare. In China, the Yuan dynasty, under Kublai Khan, set up palace kitchens to experiment with multicultural dishes. Persian, Indian recipes, and cooking steps were recorded in royal cookbooks. Mongol court feasts influenced Ming dynasty cuisine, bringing Central Asian stews into the heart of Chinese hot pot culture. But maybe the strongest legacy is this mindset: food equals power. The Mongols taught the world that what you feed, warriors, guests, even enemies can shape politics and empires. They proved a man could live on borts and fermented milk and still conquer kingdoms. Today, Mongol Empire cuisine still echoes in the tang of yogurt, the dumpling's crust, and the sizzle on the pan, the smell of lamb over coals. You just need to know where to look and have the guts to take a bite.